Estados Unidos tiene un nuevo presidente. Donald J. Trump es ahora el 47º presidente de los Estados Unidos de América. Su victoria fue considerada aplastante. Veamos qué dicen los números. El voto del colegio electoral. Aquí, Trump obtuvo un margen cómodo al haber ganado 312 votos en el colegio electoral frente a los 226 de Kamala Harris. Al igualar el peso de los estados pequeños y grandes, el voto del colegio electoral no siempre es una representación fiel del voto popular. En la segunda mayor participación electoral jamás registrada, Trump obtuvo el 49.8% de los votos emitidos. La candidata Kamala Harris obtuvo el 48.3% de los votos populares. La diferencia entre ambos candidatos es de solo 1.5 puntos porcentuales. La población estadounidense en general sigue muy dividida. Las elecciones de 2024 fueron las 10º elecciones presidenciales consecutivas en las que el margen de victoria en el voto popular fue de un solo dígito. Esto es un récord. Desde la Segunda Guerra Mundial, solo 3 candidatos han ganado por más de 5 puntos porcentuales. Por tanto, la nación está muy dividida. El Partido Republicano ganó la Cámara de Representantes y el Senado, pero por pequeños márgenes. En la Cámara, 219 republicanos frente a 215 demócratas, una diferencia de 4. En el Senado, 53 republicanos frente a 45 demócratas y 2 independientes, una diferencia ligeramente mayor de 6. Así que Donald Trump tiene el mandato de gobernar, pero necesitará ganarse tanto al público como al Congreso para su plataforma de cambio. Cualquier proyecto legislativo importante que se introduzca deberá ganarse las mentes de ambos lados de Estados Unidos, es decir, aquellos que lo eligieron debido a su plataforma nacionalista cristiana y la otra mitad que tiene un punto de vista más secular. Es atendiendo a ambos sectores de la población que se aprobará la ley dominical en Estados Unidos y en el mundo. Proyecto 2025. Aquí es donde el Proyecto 2025 resulta muy útil. El grupo de expertos conservadores de la Heritage Foundation es una potencia de política conservadora e influencia política. Su agenda ha sido cuidadosamente codificada en las más de 900 páginas del manual del Proyecto 2025 que cubre todas las áreas de gobierno. Este es un plan de despliegue rápido para restaurar a la familia en el centro de la vida estadounidense, reconfigurar completamente el gobierno e infundir valores cristianos a la cultura. 8 de las selecciones de Trump para puestos gubernamentales clave son miembros del Proyecto 2025, incluido el vicepresidente J.D. Vance, quien redactó el prólogo del mandato de liderazgo. De hecho, el equipo de transición de Trump ha estado utilizando la base de datos de personas del Proyecto 2025 para reclutar talento. La Fundación Heritage ha tenido mucha influencia sobre presidentes republicanos anteriores, como Ronald Reagan y George Bush. Claramente, también están influyendo en la estrategia de Trump y definitivamente fueron un aliado clave en su victoria electoral. Debido a que el manual del Proyecto 2025 cubre todas las áreas importantes de gobierno y política, ayudó al nuevo gobierno de Trump a comenzar a trabajar desde el primer día en la Casa Blanca e implementar rápidamente sus promesas para ir incluso más allá de lo prometido. El Proyecto 2025 incluye una propuesta de legislación laboral que favorecería un día de descanso dominical en el lugar de trabajo. Esta propuesta se enmarca como una respuesta a la necesidad humana de espiritualidad, descanso y tiempo en familia. Pero se necesitarán incentivos adicionales para persuadir a esa mitad secular de Estados Unidos. Esa motivación será proporcionada por la crisis climática. Un día de descanso para el planeta se está convirtiendo rápidamente en una propuesta muy atractiva para muchos miembros de la izquierda y el centro. Muchos cristianos que votaron por Donald Trump se identifican como nacionalistas cristianos y defienden los valores tradicionales de la familia y la fe. Votaron por Trump esperando que cumpla su promesa de dar a la iglesia más poder que nunca antes. De hecho, muchas figuras nacionalistas cristianas son muy francas en su apoyo a la unión de la iglesia y el Estado. Creen que Estados Unidos se fundó sobre principios cristianos y por lo tanto la iglesia debería liderar al Estado. Veremos que en su deseo de acercar al país a Dios a través de la legislación dominical, el nacionalismo cristiano pondrá a Estados Unidos de rodillas. ¿Qué hay en un nombre? El significado de los nombres en la Biblia. En la Biblia, un nombre refleja el carácter. El nombre de una persona, lugar o institución expresa su naturaleza, atributos, historia y destino. Por eso Dios mismo nombraba a aquellos llamados a servirle incluso antes de nacer, como Juan Bautista y Jesús. En el caso de otros personajes bíblicos, Dios cambió su nombre para reflejar su nuevo destino. Por ejemplo, Abraham significa padre exaltado, a quien Dios le cambió el nombre a Abraham, padre de muchas naciones. Después de arrepentirse y entregarse a Dios, Jacob ya no era un engañador. Dios le rebautizó Israel, el que lucha con Dios y los hombres y vence. Otro ejemplo de nombre profético es Matusalén. El hombre es recordado por tener la más grande longevidad en la Biblia, 969 años. El nombre Matusalén significa que cuando muera será enviado o cuando muera vendrá. Esta fue una referencia directa al diluvio que Dios envió en el año en que murió Matusalén. De hecho, Jesús dijo: pero como eran los días de Noé, así será también la venida del Hijo del Hombre, lo que incluiría el anuncio o la profecía por nombres. De acuerdo con esta palabra, Dios también usa nombres para anunciar o presagiar lo que llevará al mundo a la destrucción por segunda vez. En la Biblia, el nombre Noé, Noah en hebreo, es de origen hebreo y significa descanso o reposo. Esta es una señal para la última generación de que el clímax del gran conflicto entre Dios y Satanás se peleará por el verdadero día de descanso, el séptimo día de la semana, día del Señor, o el primer día de la semana, día del papado. Otra explicación dice que el nombre Noé se deriva de la raíz hebrea Nahum, que significa consolar. Este significado también es relevante para la última generación porque el pueblo de Dios está a punto de pasar por la gran tribulación. Pero nuestro Padre de todo consuelo estará con nosotros en cada prueba. Entonces, Dios usa nombres también para anunciar o profetizar lo que está por venir. Mientras seguimos el rastro de nombres relacionados con Donald Trump y el movimiento Make America Great Again, Dios nos está dando luz y revelación para comprender los movimientos finales de la historia de esta tierra. El patrón o la tipología que Dios ha establecido y nos está revelando en los nombres de los protagonistas y eventos clave de la profecía bíblica no miente. Lo que se profetiza en los nombres y eventos es verdad y sucederá. El significado del nombre Proyecto 2025. El nombre en sí, Proyecto 2025, tiene que ver con la velocidad de implementación. Algunos han sugerido que el periodo de transición de 180 días definido en el Proyecto 2025 está relacionado con la marca de la bestia, 666. 6 por 3 igual 18, por lo tanto 666. Heritage podría haberlo descrito como un plan de transición de 6 meses. Teniendo en cuenta lo que descubriremos en esta serie, su elección es significativa. También es interesante que Donald Trump se refiera a la iniciativa de reducción de costos del gobierno de Doge confiada a Elon Musk como el Proyecto Manhattan. Recuerde que el propio Trump tiene residencia en Manhattan. El Proyecto Manhattan empleó a los mejores científicos de la época, incluido Einstein, y desarrolló las 2 bombas nucleares que Estados Unidos lanzó sobre Hiroshima y Nagasaki. Durante la Segunda Guerra Mundial, las 2 ciudades quedaron completamente devastadas. Sin embargo, esa devastación palidece en comparación con lo que se avecina en esta tierra. Estados Unidos, bajo el liderazgo de Donald Trump, desempeñará un papel clave para lograrlo. El significado del nombre Donald Trump. El nombre Donald es de origen escocés y significa gobernante del mundo o líder mundial. El apellido Trump se cambió de Drum, de origen alemán, a Trump, de origen francés. Más adelante en la serie entenderemos por qué el cambio del alemán al francés es significativo y por qué el significado de la palabra Trump en francés es muy relevante para nosotros. En francés antiguo, Trump significa trompa, específicamente trompeta, y trompeur es un trompetista, el que toca o hace trompetas. Así, el nombre y apellido de Donald Trump combinados anuncian la inminente ascensión de un nuevo líder mundial al trono del poder global. Uno de los muchos usos de la trompeta en la Biblia es proclamar un nuevo rey, pero ese nuevo líder mundial no es Trump, sino que Trump anuncia al nuevo líder mundial. Las políticas y leyes que Trump promulgará para cumplir sus promesas al electorado cristiano van a resultar contraproducentes. En lugar de restaurar la soberanía nacional contra los globalistas, el nacionalismo cristiano en Estados Unidos, liderado por Donald Trump, va a dar paso a una falsa teocracia global, un régimen mundial opresivo donde la Iglesia y el Estado están unidos. Comenzará en Estados Unidos y rápidamente se extenderá por todo el mundo. Esto es lo que la Biblia llama la imagen de la bestia, que implica la unión de la Iglesia y el Estado.
Show me a silver coin.
Whose face and name are these on it? Caesar! Then render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's.
called the Enola Gay took off from Tinian Island and headed for Hiroshima, Japan. At approximately 9:15 in the morning, a gun-method uranium bomb exploded 2,000 feet above the city of Hiroshima, and it exploded above the city in order to maximize its impact. And the bomb's resulting blast was the equivalent of roughly 15,000 tons of TNT. The bomb destroyed 5 miles of the city and resulted in approximately 140,000 deaths.
In the days after, the Japanese government did not meet to discuss the surrender term of the Potsdam Conference, but the Japanese foreign minister tried to arrange a meeting with the Soviet Union to mediate negotiations for surrender. However, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan on August 9th, 3 days after the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. What were the effects on the ground?
Well, Jasmine, for this, I think it would be good if we took a look at some of the historical footage from the museum's collection. So Jasmine, let's take a look at an artifact from one of the bomb sites. Here we have a vase that was recovered by Lieutenant E.L. Wiley from Nagasaki. What do you notice about this vase?
There are some black spots covering this side of the vase, but they're not on the other side.
That's right. Those black spots are flash burns caused by the intense heat that came from the detonation of the atomic bomb. And you can tell that this side of the vase was facing the atomic bomb at the moment of the blast, whereas the other one was not. And that just shows you the intensity of the heat and the reactive causes and the devastating effect made by the atomic bomb.
So, where exactly does this leave Japan?
Well, after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Emperor of Japan, Hirohito, finally accepted the conditions of the Potsdam Declaration. So on August 15, 1945, he announced Japan's surrender via a radio broadcast, which was known as the Jeweled Voice broadcast, because this was the first time that many people in Japan had ever heard the Emperor's voice. But it's worth noting that throughout the entirety of his speech, he never once used the word surrender. Let's take a walk to the end of the gallery to look at some iconic footage from the end of World War II.
What's going on here?
So here we see some footage from the signing of the surrender document. And this happened on the deck of the battleship USS Missouri. And this happened September 2nd, 1945. And as you can see in the footage, we have both officials from the United States and also from Japan who were present for the signing of this document. The moment this document was signed, Japan fell under the power of the Supreme Commander of the Allied Powers, and that was General Douglas MacArthur. From this point on, the United States would occupy Japan, and Japan would remain under U.S. occupation until 1952.
As the story of World War II comes to a close, in some ways, the story of atomic energy is just beginning. We'll find out more in the next segment.
All right, let's take a look at the answer to the poll question. What is trinitite? The answer is C, a glass-like mineral created from the first atomic bomb blast. Trinitite is a byproduct of the Trinity test as the intense heat reacted with sand. I actually have a piece of trinitite right here. Check it out. This, ladies and gentlemen, is real trinitite. And my question as I'm holding this and smelling it and looking at it is, Sharon, is this dangerous? Do I not need to be touching this right now?
It's fine to touch it.
Okay.
Don't eat it. No.
Okay.
So it has some radioactivity. It's at about background, what we call background radioactivity. You know, radioactivity to some people is very scary, but we depend on radioactivity. That sun up in the sky is a big fusion reactor. So
Okay.
you can get radioactivity when you fly. You know, we live in it. So my advice to you is, you know, okay to touch it, wash your hands, don't eat it.
Okay, I need some Kleenex ASAP, and I need you to wet it, and I need to, wash my hands. Okay, well, this is Trinitite, ladies and gentlemen. This is amazing how this was formed. So next up, let's review what the students reported in that last segment. The deadliest war in human history was now officially over in September of 1945. We have here some newspapers from the museum's collection from the days after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki with dramatic headlines of the destruction. As you can imagine, the feelings of these scientists and average workers at the Manhattan Project sites were mixed about the usage and aftermath of the bombing. The workers who only knew a little bit about their jobs at places like Hanford or Oak Ridge, they soon understood their piece of the larger puzzle in August 1945. There was comfort that the war had ended, remorse about the civilian casualties, surprise about the lasting effects of the bombings in Japan, and uncertainties about the future. Now, some of these uncertainties centered on the tense and fragile relationships between countries after the war was over. Who would have the capability of building the bomb next? And if they did, what would stop them from using it? That reality was realized in 1949, y'all, when the Soviet Union tested their first atomic bomb. Well, with me again is the brilliant, almighty, amazing Sharon Squarsoni. What were some of the long-term and short-term effects of the atomic weapons on the Japanese populations?
So we just saw pictures from the aftermath of the bomb. Many people died instantly. They were vaporized by the heat. There were blast effects. There was short-term radiation, and there was longer-term radiation. There were many more cancers in the years following the war. And we've actually been involved in the Japanese on a long-term radiation study to determine those effects. Remember, we didn't know a lot about radiation and the effects back then, and in the ensuing decades, we've learned a lot more.
Gotcha. So tell us a little bit more about the reaction of scientists, the scientists who actually created these weapons.
So, as you could see from the headlines, some of the scientists were, some of the scientists were proud of their accomplishment. Right. It was a fantastic science experiment. And others were very afraid of what we had created and where it would go forward. And in the time immediately after the war, the U.S. kept up the level of secrecy on the project. And for scientists, secrecy is like the death of knowledge, right? We need to share our collaboration. And so many of the scientists were actually politically mobilized. They wrote letters to the president, they testified before Congress, they wanted to get engaged.
You said they wanted to get engaged, but what exactly were they informing the public about?
So a few months after the bombing, actually 1 month after the bombing, the scientists mobilized around the project site. So in Chicago, it was the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists of Chicago, and Los Alamos had a similar group, and eventually there was a Federation of Atomic Scientists. And but this bulletin group in Chicago decided they were going to put out a newsletter, and they were going to try and educate the public about the risks of nuclear weapons. And so that's what they did, and that was the birth of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, and it's still being published today.
Really? So does that answer my next question, which is how exactly did all these super smart scientists make average people, your average human being, aware, people like my grandfather and his family, aware of the issues and risks at hand?
Right, so a couple years later, in 1947, they decided they needed to put something simple up, So one of the atomic scientist from the project. His wife, Marla Langsdorff, was an artist, and she put together what became known as the doomsday clock. You can see it there on one of the early covers. And at the time it was set to, I forget whether it was 7 or 8 minutes to midnight, and that was supposed to be an easy way for the public to say, how close are we from disaster? You know, over the time, the doomsday clock has come to think a little bit more broadly. We now look at the impact of climate change on you know, the fate of humans, but mostly it's about, we created this technology, all this good technology, how do we make sure it's used for the good of humankind rather than for bad purposes?
Wow. Wow. I hope everyone watching this is feeling empowered and smarter because of this, because honestly, your answers are helping me to just get in the mindset of a civilian back then and what they were going through and the fears and the scientists with, oh my gosh, we created a monster and what do we do now? So I really appreciate that. Let's go to a video question, if you don't mind.
Okay.
All right.
Hi, we're 5th graders from Tally Elementary School in Kerrville, Texas. We heard that by dropping the atomic bomb, we saved lives. How can that be true?
So that's a fantastic and complicated question. Kids, what you need to remember is that the cost in human lives of World War II was enormous. So military and civilian, 60 to 65 million people died. Just for the US military, we lost about 400,000 service people. So when our leaders were thinking about this atomic bomb, they were thinking, well, maybe this is a way to shorten the war. Maybe we can save lives. Now, it's a very complicated calculation, and certainly there were over 200,000 lives in Japan lost of civilians. So it's always tough. These are questions of, you know, war and peace.
Very tough, very tough. That's why it's just better if everyone could just get along. That's how I feel. Let's go to a live question right now, somewhere in America. Let's see. All right, this is from Colin. What up, Colin? His question is, why did the glass turn green after the explosion?
Great question. So the bomb goes off. There's the iconic mushroom cloud. It sucks up all the sand in the desert. And it gets superheated and it drops back down as this kind of glass, as it cools, this glass structure. So what, you know, if you think about glazes for ceramics, what makes different colors? Well, it's the minerals in the sand. So a lot of this trinitite was green, but some of it, there were some other colors, because what else evaporated in the bomb? It was the iron and steel in the tower that supported the bomb, and also there was a lot of copper cabling for the wiring. So there are different colors of trinitite, but a lot of it is green.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you so much for your insight, Professor Squassoni. We will chat more about the bulletin after our next segment, but let's now open up our final poll question. Godzilla, the iconic Japanese monster, debuted for the first time on film in 1954. True or false? Godzilla was a response to the fears of nuclear destruction during World War II and the Cold War. A, true. B, false. I would like you all to vote right now. And let's turn back to Isaac to learn a bit more about Los Alamos National Laboratory today.
Hey everyone, we're back in Los Alamos with Elliot from the Bradbury Science Museum to learn about the different jobs here during the past and present. Where are we right now?
So right now we're standing in front of the barracks and former dormitories of the WACs.
Who are these WACs?
Well, actually, let me go show you inside. WAC stands for Women's Army Corps, and they were an auxiliary unit of the U.S. Army. Today, women are integrated into the U.S. military, but back then, each branch of the military had an auxiliary unit for women. Like Hanford and Oak Ridge, Los Alamos needed an influx of workers during the war, and women helped fill these needs both in a civilian and military capacity across the lab.
Could you tell us about this place?
So this barracks was actually designed by the US military. Remember when we were over at the Fuller Lodge building and we were talking about just how much construction had to go on? Well, the military was building facilities like this. This was a barracks that was actually designed to house members of the WACs. And so people would be spending the evenings here and then going to their jobs in downtown in Los Alamos.
So WAC women filled a variety of jobs here during World War II. What kind of, or how did the lab change after World War II was over?
Well, that's a really good question, because with all this construction and all the stuff that was built up here, almost immediately after the end of the Second World War, Los Alamos pretty much dropped off. From about a peak of 6,000 people working at Los Alamos during the height of the Manhattan Project, less than 1,000 remained by the end of 1946. However, between the end of the Second World War and the end of 1946, this was still part of the Manhattan Project, and this was still run by the Army. And so General Groves actually had a directive for the people that remained at Los Alamos that they were to continue developing and improving the nation's nuclear deterrent. And why don't we go over to the Bradbury Science Museum and we can talk a little bit more about that.
Let's do it. So what kind of work is at the lab today?
So the work that's done at Los Alamos National Laboratory basically covers every single scientific discipline that you can imagine. Everything from metallurgy and chemistry and theoretical physics to biology and nanotechnology as well. There are over 11,000 people that work at the laboratory, and if you can name the discipline, they do that work. One that always comes to mind is my sister, who's actually a geologist that works at Los Alamos National Laboratory. In addition to working with volcanology and seismology, she's responsible for doing a lot of seismic detection of underground nuclear tests that other nations might be doing.
So what kind of career paths at the lab today?
So the career paths are basically as diverse as the people that work here. You've got, like I said, you've got physicists, you've got chemists, you've got engineers, people that are involved in some of the largest structures of the universe, astrophysicists, and then people that are involved in some of the smallest items, such as nanotechnology. So if you name it, Los Alamos is doing it.
Thank you so much for everything today. I learned a lot.
My pleasure, Isaac.
The dropping of the atomic bomb proves to be one of the most important events in the 20th century. Right here in the United States, scientific experimentation took us from the first sustained chain reaction, which couldn't even power a light bulb in late 1942, to the test and usage of destructive atomic weapons less than 3 years later. The pace of innovation is staggering.
These efforts not only involved famous scientists, but 130,000 average Americans, many of them not even knowing where the details of their work may lead. As some communities were moved out of these sites, new ones were constructed almost overnight to meet unprecedented production goals. Rapid migration and growth sometimes meant societal tension and inequity.
The bomb's history and legacy is complicated, and still is to this day. 75 years later, many continue to debate the usage of bombs on Japan. After World War II's end, the stockpile of weapons, thousands of times more powerful than Little Boy and Fat Man, dominated Cold War strategy. Today, national labs like Los Alamos address nuclear threats while also pioneering amazing science.
We can both marvel at the remarkable advancements while also considering their consequences, many of which still resonate today.
Thank you so much to all of these amazing students for their thorough reporting. I was very impressed. Now, let's take a look at the answer to the final poll question. True or false? Godzilla was a response to the fears of nuclear destruction during World War II and the Cold War. The answer is A, true. In the 1954 film Godzilla, or Gojira in Japanese, was awakened from a hydrogen bomb blast. It is a metaphor for the destructive capabilities of atomic weapons. Wow. Well, we're back with Sharon to talk about some of the work that she does today with the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. Now, the Bulletin just set the doomsday clock a couple weeks ago. Did you help decide where to set the clock?
I did, but I am one of about 20 members of the Science and Security Board at the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. And as I may have mentioned already, we take into account what's happening with nuclear weapons, but also climate change, and a little bit now we're thinking about emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and gene cloning, those kinds of things. We did, you're gonna ask me, what's the clock?
Yeah, like what does that mean when you say you set the clock? Because I set my iPhone, I mean, I set that, but I'm sure it's a little
right.
different.
So with this iconic clock setting, what we set it either closer or further away from midnight. So the closer it is to midnight, the closer we are to, or the higher our nuclear risks have gone. And we set the clock a few weeks ago to 100 seconds before midnight.
Okay, prior to you all setting it, was it closer or further away from 100 seconds?
It was further away. It had been at 2 minutes to midnight. Now, to give you a little perspective, the time when it was set at 2 minutes to midnight was in 1953, when the Soviets tested their first hydrogen bomb, because scientists at the Bulletin thought this is a really big development. This is, these bombs are huge and very destructive. So that gives you a sense. So why did we set it at 100 seconds to midnight? We have no arms control going on with Russia. All the nuclear weapon states are modernizing their platforms, everything. Their aircraft and submarines and missiles. North Korea says it doesn't want to get rid of its nuclear weapons and doesn't want to talk to us. And Iran has just said it's going to drop out of a very important treaty, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which keeps them from getting nuclear weapons.
That's a lot of information and it's kind of heavy. So for the students watching this, I want them to know how empowered they really are. So is there anything that they can do out there to minimize their risk today?
So you're doing one of the most important things right now, which is getting educated about nuclear weapons and the threats. Another thing is political action. I know you guys are too young to vote, but your parents aren't too young to vote, and it doesn't matter what party, you need to exercise your political rights. You can write letters to your congressmen and your senators. You can become nuclear physicists or aerospace engineers. There are a lot of different ways to get involved. I think our message is really one of optimism. We created this technology, and so we should be able to create some other technology or approaches to turn the hands back on the clock.
Very true. Now, the student reporters left us with their final thoughts. So my question is, what are your biggest takeaways? This is a big question, but what are your biggest takeaways overall about the Manhattan Project?
So honestly, it's hard not to be impressed with what all these women and men did during the Manhattan Project. I mean, just an enormous undertaking. They worked around the clock. They did what no one had ever done before. And the end result was that World War II was over. So, but you also have to put it in the broader context. 2 bombs ended the war, but over the course of history, we built more than 30,000 bombs ourselves, so did the Soviets. Mm-hmm. We've been able to destroy the planet many times over. And so now it's really time to look at those risks and do something about them. Let's get rid of some of those nuclear weapons. You don't have to totally believe in nuclear disarmament to understand that we at least need to reduce the stockpiles and reduce the risks.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for your insight and your perspective, and for answering all of these student questions out here today. We also want to thank all of our filming partners, including the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, the Department of Energy, the Manhattan Project National Historical Park, the White Sands Missile Range, the Bradbury Science Museum, the City of Los Alamos, and the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Tell us your thoughts about this program by filling out the survey in the box below the screen or at slido.com. Or you can hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag MPEFT. Signing off from the National World War II Museum right here in my city, New Orleans, Louisiana, it's your boy, D1, along with my amazing co-host, Professor Sharon Squassoni. Thank you for watching.